Hello, my name is Kriti Thakur, and today we are talking about why entrepreneurship can be really lonely as a journey with Raashid Navlakhi, the founder of Jigsaw Thinking. Hi, Rash, how are you?
I'm very good, Kriti. Thanks for having me here.
Very excited. Not like we don't talk a lot, and that's why our journeys aren't very lonely. But let's get started by understanding like a typical journey for an entrepreneur at the start of their career as entrepreneurs. What does that look like, and why does that very slowly but surely turn lonely?
So I don't think, unfortunately, it's not a slow or sure way of turning lonely. It's lonely off the bat.
Oh boy.
So I'll just talk from my personal experience.
Yeah.
So basically, when I started out or decided to start out, the one thing that is definitely with you is a sense of possibility because it's a blank canvas, right? You get to paint whatever you want, and that's what's really exciting about entrepreneurship. It's that sense of possibility and your drive to pursue it. But along with that comes also the sense of overwhelm with uncertainty. So the blank canvas gives you possibility, but it also gives you a blank canvas to stare at. There's
Yeah.
nothing else on it. So there's no sort of borders you need to color in between the lines, right? It can go anyway. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, and you don't know what the right decisions are, what the right moves are. And the only way to sort of get through that is to move and take action. My problem when I started is that it's actually very tough to take action by yourself with all of that uncertainty. So, what I started doing is my natural instinct was to try and deal with that uncertainty by bringing as much clarity as possible. So, what I ended up doing was creating, in my opinion, the world's greatest business plan over the next 3 months, right? I knew exactly how I was going to dominate the world. All of the Excel sheets lined up. My presentation was beautiful. The only problem is that nobody saw that presentation apart from me. And I didn't take any action, create any impact, make any money for the first 3 months.
Yeah.
And I think when I reflect on it right now, if I had either someone else or if I had a community around me, that never would have happened. Because when you have someone else as part of the journey or a community around you, you are driven to take action, right? So whether that is good social pressure or just good old motivation or a sharing of ideas or seeing other people do amazing things, it wants to make you sort of move into action.
Mhm.
But for me, the first 3 months was just, hey, this is great. I can do awesome stuff. Oh, there's lots of uncertainty. Let's create this brilliant business plan. I have to figure all of this out all by myself. And unfortunately, entrepreneurs really buy that premise. They keep telling themselves that they're lonely and they've got to figure it out all
Yeah.
themselves and prove that they're the smartest or the best. And in my opinion, it's a bunch of bullshit because I've been through it, and
Yeah.
it really doesn't amount to that much. So I think the beginning is possibility, uncertainty, loneliness, and unfortunately, the last of this is created by yourself because you decide to be lonely. That's
Yeah.
at least how it started with me, and having spoken to hundreds of entrepreneurs, worked with them, it's unfortunately a very typical case when you're starting out your career as an entrepreneur.
So I think there are two facets to this that I think you painted a beautiful picture of. But I think there's one which is very self-inflicted. Because what I'm taking away is that when we lean into entrepreneurship or as self-starters, we're like, I have to do everything on my own now that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm nobody else's boss. I mean, I'm nobody else's employee. I'm my own boss.
Yeah.
So there's this whole hero's complex, self-inflicted pressure and loneliness. And on the other side, there's also just the environment around us.
Mm-hmm.
We're designed to go to university, and then there is a path in your career, and then suddenly you drop off that path and decide to
Yes.
do your own thing at your own pace. So can you go into both of that a little more, maybe the latter, on how it feels like when you go move away from a job and into this, okay, I have to get up today and have my big goals and be an entrepreneur. What does that do to your everyday life? Because everybody else is
Yeah.
going to office.
I think it's, yeah, you differentiated them really well. So I'll go into the latter, as you said, and it is such a huge difference. In fact, I'm thinking about it now throughout my journey when you've said it, and it just makes it even more stark realizing what those 3 months were like. Because as you said, uh, before going to school, you've got your family around you. Then you go to school and you have your friends and family around you. Then you go to university where you've got I did my university abroad in the UK, and so I had an experience of meeting a whole bunch of new people from different walks of life, constantly having conversation with them about different things, disagreeing, agreeing with each other, working together. Then I got into work, and I worked in the UK as well. And I've worked in India as well. And I know that it is overall fairly collaborative. So when you do work with others, right? It's not just that you work with others and collaborate with them, but you're literally sitting beside other people as you are working. And that gives you a sense of energy because you can have a conversation about stuff. If you have a problem, you can walk over, 3 steps over, solve that problem, sort of move on as well.
Yeah.
When I came back to India and decided to start by myself, literally the picture was my parents went to work in the morning. My sister was already working in the US. And so it was me in the house for 3 months every single day. And so it was such a big difference from where I had started, which was constantly, and personally, I'm a people person in the typical sense of the word. I get energy from people. I love talking to them. I love doing stuff with people. And suddenly I was sort of alone and I had to figure stuff out. And at the time, I thought I was doing a really good job because I had set my alarms. I was waking up on time, doing work every day. And I was like, okay, I'm winning. I'm able to focus and do these type of things. But the fact is that it wasn't a very fulfilling, enjoyable journey because it was just me by myself. And I think by nature, we're social beasts. We like being along with people. We do our best work along with people. We might need our quiet time, but if it's quiet time and alone time all of the time, it gets pretty intense. So
daunting.
Those 3 months were really not great. It was just me and a PowerPoint, and their PowerPoints are not really good company. So it sucked. But thanks for bringing that up, Kriti. Thank you.
Yeah, my job is to bring back, memories we learn from.
Memories. Thank you.
Insightful memories, nonetheless. So, Raashid, when we are at that inflection point almost, and I think many of us feel that when we start doing things on our own, it starts on a high, and then you kind of sustain that high, depends on how good that is, and then suddenly you're questioning everything, or you feel like this dip in energy, dip in momentum. So how does that impact these goals that we had? How does it impact sort of your mental health? Or what are the impacts that we see when we reach this inflection point of, I started so excited and now it's getting lonely and it's getting daunting and I don't know why I'm doing this? What happens?
Yeah. I mean, you said it yourself. It's terrible because those goals that you set out suddenly either feel overwhelming because you're like, how am I going to get there? It's me against the world. How am I going to figure this out all by myself? Those goals get overwhelming. If they get overwhelming, one of two things happen, right? We're humans, so we end up doing flight or fight. If we go into flight response, it's literally just the goal's too big. It's crazy. Let's get back to a job or aim for something less exciting. And going back to a job or doing something less exciting, I remember a friend of mine said this so well. If your initial goal was to travel to the Swiss Alps, and your secondary goal when you realize it's tough and you have to figure it out all by yourself is let's go for a 2-hour road trip. The 2-hour road trip is just not as exciting as this journey into a different part of the world. And so then you just hate that goal and then you might not even do that.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of goals, it's like this vicious spiral that you sort of go down, and that's possible. If you end up going with the fight response, not the flight one, what ends up happening, and it happened to me, I had bits of both at different points in time over those 3 months. What ends up happening and what I did is I started really going into that self-infliction zone in that fight response, which was, it is me against the world, but I have to figure this out. I have to beat life, the situation I'm in, and then I will rise up, through the ashes, and I will do this amazing thing.
Journey.
And papers will write all about me, and I'll do all of that. And what ends up happening, and what happened to me, is I just worked harder, but I worked harder at something that was completely pointless because I wasn't turning any of it into action. And the problem is, when you're alone, there is nobody or no community that helps you get out of all of these things. You're just stuck.
In a loop,
whether we like it or
almost.
not, it takes an external force to get you out of that loop and get you to a better place. And for me, that external force has always been people and community. And even now, it continues to stay the same. And so, yeah, I think it's devastating to be stuck in that loop because it can lead to giving up the dream. And that is by far the worst case scenario, right? Where you give up really, really quickly.
I think it's important to define when we say lonely, it's not, I'm just feeling lonely. Like I feel sad. It's essentially more than that. So when you say lonely, what does that mean? Because, some people think that, I'm by myself, I'm single, so I'm lonely, or I'm at home today and I haven't met anyone, I'm lonely. But in the world of entrepreneurship, when you say have like these really big goals and you've made plans and you have commitments and you have to deliver your promise, loneliness has a very different sort of, what does it show up as to us as entrepreneurs when we feel lonely? And what is that loneliness?
So I always think about when I visualize it, I imagine like an artist from like 100, 200 years ago. Because as an artist, if you put yourself in that situation, you're looking at a blank canvas and you are painting something that nobody else understands because it's all just in your head and you're going through the creative process of painting this, right? And it really sucks beyond a point when others don't understand what you're up to. And so I feel like that's the same type of loneliness you feel as an entrepreneur. I was definitely meeting friends. I had just come back to India after years in the UK. I was meeting friends all of the time.
Exactly.
So I was not lonely in the conventional sense at all. Finally had time with my parents, with friends from school, college, things like that. And so I was definitely not lonely in that sense. But when I was working on my entrepreneurial dream, that's when I felt really lonely. I felt like there's nobody else with me. I can't share this experience with anyone else. I can't have a conversation with anyone else about it. And later I realized that it's not true. That might be where you start as an entrepreneur, but you can decide whether you want to change that. At that point in time, I just went into that sort of loop we were talking about and just constantly kept telling myself, yes, I'm lonely, I've got to sort of figure this out. So I was having loads of social interactions, but felt incredibly alone in terms of what I was working on.
Yeah, I think for everybody listening, it's not lonely as in you're, sitting in a room and asocial and just, it's not the conventional loneliness. When entrepreneurs feel lonely, they almost feel misunderstood. You feel exhausted. It shows up in different ways. And so I think let's just go a little bit into what it does to the business and what it does to your goals. And I think one of the things that you said was it significantly impacts your relationship with the goals you set. You either hate yourself for setting them, or you set goals that you will achieve because no one else is really keeping you honest, or you're just lost and don't have goals. But also there are significant indicators that it's impacting your business. And I think, Raashid, maybe I can get us started. So the first one, for example, is when you were saying, only I know what the painting I'm painting. So it's the work I do, only I understand and only I can explain it. It significantly impacts how you how you talk about, position yourself. So if you're talking to someone and explaining your business, you're like, you know what, you probably won't get it. It's quite complicated. And so the way you talk, it's almost like I'm this lone warrior doing this awesome thing, but hey, you know what? You won't get it.
Yeah.
Because you're not really talking about it to anybody. So I think
this happened to me several times. I actually when I came back to India, I went to a whole bunch of, house parties and all of this. And obviously, if you meet people after a while, they're like, what are you up to? Right. And in my case, it was, what are you up to? And why did you give up your cushy job and great salary for what you're doing? So tell us. And literally, I remember actively shirking that question. Because I was tired, or I somehow got it in my head that I'm exhausted by the fact that nobody gets it. And so I just wouldn't bother sharing it anymore. Right. And it impacted, of course, the business because less people knew about what I was doing. Less people could help me with it. Less people could give me ideas about it. But it also affected me because I was actively being drained every time somebody said, what are you up to?
Instead of being...
and people say that a lot. Instead of being super excited and like, can't wait to share, oh my God, this is the awesome thing I'm doing. Do you want to know about it? And that's how it should be, right? When you're excited
it should
about
be
what you're doing.
energizing.
Yeah. And so that energy is completely lost when you do it by yourself, because it does something to your head. Basically, as humans, we like meeting people. So it doesn't quite work.
I agree. And so let's talk a little bit maybe about the business metrics, Raashid, from your perspective, really quickly. So to actually quantify this. So like I said, if one of the significant impacts, like you said, is on marketing, which is people don't know about you, people don't understand what you do because you have made it a big deal that nobody gets it in your head. And if that clarity doesn't come from you, no agency can help you. Right? What other significant impacts do we see this happen, have on the business front?
So really simple. In 3 months, I got exactly 0 people interested in my business in terms of not as investors or anything, but as clients or customers that I wanted to serve. 3 months was 0 people because I was feeling alone and the impacts of it that we've talked about. Then what I did is I found myself a community that I could plug into because I realized something had to shift, and I got a bit of a reality check. When I made that shift, I went to one community meeting where I still remember, there were 4 other people in that meeting. And they basically asked me what I was up to. And I told them what my beautiful plan was, right? The world domination plan. They told me, cool, what have you done? And I said, no, I've made this plan. And then they kept saying, what have you done? And I realized eventually that my answer was nothing. And so then what they said is they just laid out a challenge for me and said, we'll talk about how the challenge went next week. And in that 1 week, I got my first 16 clients on board just because in that community setting, I got the reality check I needed. I got the encouragement I needed. I got the challenge I needed. And I got a little bit of this is what you could do to potentially get your first client on board. Right. So 3 months was 0. The week after community plugin was 16. And that trend or that trajectory has continued over the last few years as well. Every time I open myself to community and to people, whether it's the team or whether it's the community outside of us, the results just come much more naturally and in a much more fun way because you're interacting with people. When I'm doing stuff alone, though, of course, it's required every now and then, if I get stuck in that place, and unfortunately, we've had conversations about it, Kriti, where it still happens to me. I get stuck in that place. Nothing happens for a week, right? Or a couple of weeks. And as an entrepreneur, you can't afford that.
Yeah, I think you cannot afford that. It's the cost of keep staying lonely is way too high as an entrepreneur, because as coaches, we see them get stuck in these ways of thinking and operating that are so difficult to break in time. And as you were talking about it, I was actually visualizing it as sometimes entrepreneurs are like, if you're sitting on a wheel, and your car is like on neutral and you're revving and you're pressing the accelerator, but you're really not moving forward, right? So sometimes like the community acts like the wheels for you, right? It gives you direction, it gives you accountability, it gives you momentum to actually go. Otherwise, we're just like all energy and rev and no movement at all. But no, I totally agree. Any sort of closing remarks, Raashid, on how we should think about entrepreneurship and how to not make it so lonely?
I think the first step with most things is to decide what you want. So you first need to make the decision that I do not want to be lonely. Once you've made that decision and you realize it is a choice, it is not something that you are burdened with forever. If you realize it's a choice, every time there's a choice, it means you can do something about it and you can take action. So the first thing is to accept that there's a choice to be made. The second step is to say, okay, I know the choice is to be lonely or to be enabled by community. And then the action that I would always encourage people to do is do what I did because I saw the impact firsthand, and find a community to plug into or build a community around yourself that can be your support system to move forward, not just to make you feel good, but to give you the things that you talked about, the motivation, drive to keep going, the input that you need to solve problems around the way, and the accountability to actually keep moving forward every single week. Because as an entrepreneur, nobody else is going to hold you accountable unless you give them that role to actually hold you accountable.
Because you are your own boss, and sometimes that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, this was great, Raashid. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening, please don't get stuck in this loop that it's, you have to figure everything out on your own. Entrepreneurship is not designed to be a lonely journey you have to go through by yourself. We have a blast with our community, so we're hoping you find the right tribe to do this with as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.